Hello, thank you so much for joining today's program. We're delighted that you're here to meet and hear from Ingrid Rojas Contreras. It will be a wonderful program about her beautiful book, Fruit of the Drunken Tree. We have the book in the Pasadena Public Library. This is a copy of the book. It has the Drunken Tree flower on the cover of it. And you can also, in addition to checking out from the library, you can also purchase it at Vroman's bookstore. So in order to enjoy the program the most today, we're asking everybody to please mute yourself, and we'll start shortly when we have everybody has arrived today. So thank you very much for coming to, this is our second program for the National Hispanic Heritage Month. Hello, we've just had someone else join us today, and we thank you very much for coming. We're going to start about 5 minutes after 5 o'clock to let everyone come in today. But I just want to remind you, please, to mute yourself for optimal enjoyment. There's live transcript, so you have to activate that at your end if you would like to do that with your Zoom. Following the program, there will be chat questions with our author, Ingrid. So if you could please put them in chat, and then we'll be sure and ask them and have a nice discussion. Today's program will be a discussion between Ingrid and myself, and she's going to be sharing information about her book and reading some parts of her book to us too. So as I said to the other people that were here, some of you are hearing this twice, but this is the cover of the book. The book is available in the Pasadena Public Library. It's also available at Vroman's, and on the cover is the beautiful flower from the fruit of the drunken tree. The program today will be recorded. Ingrid has allowed us to record it, and we will be putting it on the YouTube Pasadena Public Library, so that you can share it with your friends after the program and encourage them to listen to it and possibly check out the book for their reading enjoyment. So have any of you read the book? If you have, just put your hand up. You can see it. No, well, you will enjoy it. It's very, very enjoyable. So this is the second program in our National Hispanic Heritage Month. We started yesterday with Alex Espinoza. Next week, we have Michael Jaime speaking as well, Michael Jaime Becerra. Then the following month, when we get closer to the end of it, October the 15th, we have Ruben Martinez who's going to be presenting. Those are some of the adult author programs. We also have Susana Horace that is talking about her journey on the Camino de Santiago. We have a program about Hispanic and Latina architecture in Pasadena, and we have a program Latinos and Latinas in Pasadena. So if you go to our website, you can see the program, and the brochure is a very attractive brochure that's online. It is in English and in Spanish. So it has all of the activities. We have activities for children, teens, and adults. We have story times, and we have especially wonderful take and makes so that everybody learns the different culture of Hispanic art and can have the opportunity of learning how to make lots of wonderful things in the take and make program. So be sure and check that out. And there are several Beyond the book groups as well. So I think I'll go ahead and start the program. Again, thank you so much for coming. And we're delighted to welcome Ingrid Rojas Contreras today as our presenter and our author of Fruit of the Drunken Tree. So Pasadena Public Library presents National Hispanic Heritage Month to celebrate, honor, and recognize the culture, achievements, and accomplishments of Hispanic and Latina Americans. September 15th to October 15th is an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the members of these communities and their ancestors who hail from Mexico, parts of the Caribbean, Central and South America, and Spain. So you might wonder why it's September 15th to October 15th. Well, it starts on September 15th to celebrate the anniversaries of national independence of several Latin American countries. On September 15th, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua celebrate their independence. Mexico celebrates their independence on September 16th, and Chile on September the 18th. So in 1968, President then Lyndon Johnson was the first president that decided we should have a month-long celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Week. And then 20 years later, President Ronald Reagan decided that it should become a whole month of activities to honor Hispanics. Then, and bringing it up to today, and yesterday, President Joseph Biden declared September 15th to October 15th, 2021 as National Hispanic Heritage Month. So I will tell you a little bit about Ingrid, but before I do that, we had a little discussion before, Ingrid, together that we call it National Hispanic Heritage Week, but it could also be called National Latinx Week, National Latina Week. So do you have any comments upon that, Ingrid, or what is the difference?
Yeah, so Hispanic either means, there's like two roots of the meaning of that word. And one word has to do with like Spanish speaking countries. Not all countries in South America speak Spanish. So then it's exclusive of other countries that are in that area. And then the other thing that I think bothers a lot of South Americans is that it's the other kind of etymology for it just means of Spain. So it's a term that is kind of referencing the colonization of the continent as a starting point to like the point of celebration. So I use like Latinx Heritage Month for that reason, just because it includes like all of the South American countries. And I think that's, yeah. And then it doesn't have that reminder of the colonization in it.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. So you've had a chance to meet Ingrid, and we're just delighted that she's here today. She was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia, and Fruit of the Drunken Tree was a silver medal winner in the first fiction from the California Book Awards and New York Times Editor Choice Award. Her essays and short stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, BuzzFeed, Nylon, and many others. She's currently a visiting writer at St. Mary's College in Northern California, and she's working on a family memoir about her grandfather, a curandero, I'm not sure I'm saying that correct, from Colombia, who it was said had the powers to move clouds. So this is the book that you're working on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about it, or are you superstitious not to talk about it? Or
no, I've been talking about it for a bit. It's a family memoir. So the I guess the translation for curandero could be something like folk healer. or get closer to like medicine man. And he came from my grandfather came from a whole lineage of healers. And he was supposed to initiate, it was only supposed to be through the male line, and he was supposed to initiate one of his sons, but he didn't think that any of the sons that he had, had what it took to become a healer. And the only person he thought could do it was my mom. So it's a story about that, and it's a story about what's inherited and what isn't inherited. And it tells 3 generations. So like my grandfather's story, my mother's, and then my story, and different ways in which they intersect.
So do you have the healing powers too?
No. The connection is that my mother, when she was young, when she was 8 years old, she fell down an empty well. Wow. And she went into a coma. And then when she woke up from the coma, which was maybe like 8 months later, she also got amnesia during that time. So she had amnesia, and then she could see and hear ghosts. And so the family said that she had kind of like she became a healer through the fall or through getting amnesia. And so then later, when I was in my 20s and I was living in Chicago, I got in a bike accident and I wasn't wearing a helmet. So I lost my memory too, like my mother. And I was without a memory for something like 8 weeks. So my family kind of said the same thing, like they expected that I would come out of the amnesia with some ability to see or hear ghosts, and then nothing happened for me, and so everyone was kind of very disappointed. So that's the kind of like starting point is that it has to do with like memory, amnesia, and also like cultural memory, cultural amnesia, and there's a lot of fun ghost stories in it.
Oh, it sounds very, very interesting, and we'll look forward to it. When do you expect it? You're editing it right now or going through it. When do you expect it to be published?
Yeah, it's coming out July next year. That's our date.
Well, congratulations to you. That's a big accomplishment to get a book published and have the date. So good luck. Good luck. We'll all look forward to reading it for sure. But well, the fruit of the drunken tree is a powerful testament to the impossible choices women are often forced to make in the face of violence and the unexpected connections that can blossom out of desperation. So 7-year-old Chula lives a carefree life in her gated community in Bogota, but the threat of kidnappings, car bombs, and assassinations hover just outside her walls, where the godlike drug lord Pablo Escobar reigns, capturing the attention of the whole nation. When her mother hires Petrona, a live-in maid from the city's guerrilla-occupied slum, Chula makes it her mission to understand Petrona's mysterious ways. As both girls' families scramble to maintain stability amidst the rapidly escalating conflict, Petrona and Chula find themselves entangled in a web of secrecy. So can you tell us a little bit about the secrecy that they do? Or they experience?
Yeah, without like ruining the plot of the book. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure that the Petrona, the girl who lives in what we called in Colombia an invasion, which is kind of a displaced people settlement in the mountains that are outside of, surrounding the city. That starts to get a guerrilla occupation. And so she finds herself in a place where she's pressured or threatened into collaborating with them. And then against the family that she's working for. Yeah. And so that was a real, that part of the story, as I was telling you earlier before we opened the room, that was the part of the story that's based on something real that happened. yeah, and I think that I was always, I think that from the United States, we see a lot of stories about Colombian violence. And I wanted to do a story that was about Colombian violence, that showed a different kind of origin of violence, or a different kind of understanding of how violence is possible. And I was more interested in the gray area, which, you know, means to me just people in desperate situations having to make desperate decisions. And that's really what I was writing toward when I was working on that novel.
So the novel, apparently from what I read, is a little autobiographical. Part of it is. So what part is it? The young girls, or just the whole feeling of the book, or any individual, or based on family members?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are real. So for example, all of the historical elements that are in the novel are real. So I mentioned a lot of politics and a lot of news in the book, and that's all real. And then the family in the book, the one that's living in a gated community, each character is based on my family. But you know, when I was working on the book, I was just very clear with them about what was real and what wasn't. So I think very early on in the draft, the characters were very similar. And then I saw in the years that I was working on the novel, which was something like eight years, they just became their own people. And so I would often just call a family member and tell them about what their fictional counterpart was up to. So, you know, it just became someone else in the end. It just became like, so the whole family feels like very distinct to me. Like it feels very different, even though, you know, maybe some personality traits are maybe similar. But I've changed a lot of it too.
So, so it really is, the book is inspired by your life. So can you tell us what your life was like when you lived in Colombia? And how old were you when you also at the end of the book thanked your family and the acknowledgments very much for their support while you were writing this book, because you just said you contacted them so much. And so then you immigrated to the United States. How can you tell us about your immigration journey or immigrant journey? And
yeah, I left Colombia when I was 14 years old. And I, you know, very different than the book. And I actually, that became the moment when I started to write. I was always just really good at English, and I just really loved English as a language. It's my second tongue. And what I loved about it, once I emigrated, we left because it was too violent, and we went to Venezuela. And I just started to write to myself in English because it was a language that was just something that I could have for myself, and it wasn't something that I was sharing with anybody else. So I wasn't even talking to other people in English, or I wasn't even reading in English, which is, it seems like strange when I think about it now, because I was just, you know, having conversations, like my whole life was in Spanish, and then I just had all of these private moments that were just me and English. And I think because I was still learning the language, I was very excited about, you know, being experimental with what could happen with English. And then I came to the US when I was, I think 18. And yeah, and I first, and I think that's when I maybe like really started to write more traditional stories. I think before it might have been very experimental.
based on family events, or what you dreamt was going to happen, or different things you wanted to explore, people's feelings or places, or what you wanted to have happen?
I think so. The novel did start as, I think I wanted to tell the story as nonfiction, I think initially. And then when I started to do that, I found myself very quickly frozen. Like I couldn't actually tell it as nonfiction. And so, and I think that maybe it was just too close, or yeah, there's sometimes like with some things, especially in writing, it feels like you need some kind of in between landscape or medium in order to be able to access it. And so for me, that was fiction. So the moment that I kind of started to change the names, and the moment that it just started to become something else, or I, changed the situation somewhat, but kind of like left the skeleton of what had happened, I found that I could write something that was more emotionally true. So when I was writing nonfiction, it was factual, but I couldn't get to the actual emotions of what had happened. But I started that when I first arrived when I was 18, and then I did not look at that writing for many years, because I feel like I just wasn't ready to tell that story. And I wrote, different kind of short stories that were, I guess they were still about South America. There was still a lot of women in the short stories that I was writing. There was still a lot of kind of loss in what I was writing. But yeah, so it was, I think after a while, once I returned to the novel, and I just felt ready, and then it just kind of, I don't want to say happened quickly, because it didn't, because it was 8 years that I was working on it. But the story flowed by that point.
So how did you write? I mean, during those 8 years that you wrote, you had a lot of different jobs. You were employed. Did you keep all, or do you have all of your notebooks and all of your drafts? When you win your Pulitzer Prize, those are going to be very, very valuable.
I have some. What I used to do is I used to print out the draft that I was working on, and then I would cut, and like we use cut and paste on the computer. I would do that with actual scissors and tape. So I would end up with this draft that was just just look like just full of tape, and just sometimes I just cut out one sentence, so it just kind of like looks like a tiny like rectangle that I'm trying to glue into something else. So I have those early papers, and then I've moved so much. When I was living in Chicago, I think I changed apartments like every year, that it just I didn't keep a lot of stuff, but I also didn't come with a lot of stuff. I think when I arrived to the US, I just had a suitcase with me, and that was probably just remnant from when we left Colombia. We also just had like a suitcase, so we didn't have anything. We just had like one thing with us. So, but I've kept some of it.
So you're not a collector. Do you think, have you changed and become a collector, or are you somebody that just really has a suitcase of things? I've always kind of wondered about that.
I mean, I have things now. I think I still don't like to have a lot of things. I think it's I don't know what it is. I have like a few things that are from my childhood in Colombia, and there's like 3 objects. And we left, and we left in such a hurry, but I just love these 3 objects, and then wherever they are, I just feel like I'm at home. So that's a feeling that I don't need to I don't need a lot of stuff.
You don't need a lot of stuff, yes, because sometimes as Americans, they talk about that we have so much stuff, and everybody's constantly always getting something new or something different. So it just depends upon your background. do you want to share? Do you like to share those three things that are memories of your time in Colombia, or talk about how you had to leave because of what was going on in the country in Bogota? And was that difficult to get out? And then you went to Venezuela, and then how did you signed up to come to the United States and got your American passport, or came on a visitor's visa? And
yeah, so the three objects, there's like there's a rock that I have from my grandmother's house, and then there's like a little ink bottle that I bought when I was a teenager in Bogota that I never opened, and I've never opened it. And it just feels important that it never opens. And then I have this little rectangle from like my kindergarten's tangram set. Do you know what those are? It's like the little kind of shapes that are like wooden, and it's a puzzle piece, and you rearrange it into different shapes. So for some reason, when I was a kid, I was just fell in love with the little red wooden rectangle one. And every day when school was over, I would beg my teacher to let me take it home, and then I would bring it back the next day. And I just like wanted to, I don't know why, but it was just like very nice to hold. And so by the end of the year, she was just like, you should just take just take it.
It's yours. It has lots and lots of meaning to you. Yeah, well, those are definitely very, very special things. So the fruit of the Drunken Tree figures heavily in your book. So why did you pick the fruit of the Drunken Tree? Is it a national tree in Colombia, or was it in your home in Bogota?
Yeah, it's like in the novel, the tree is in the garden of the family. And that was also my situation when I was growing up. We had this tree in the garden of our house. And it was just, it's like it's a tree that's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. It's very colorful. It smells like perfume. And then it's very poisonous. And in Colombia, there's this drug that's made for it that's called burundanga. And we've been using it since pre-colonial times. But one of the modern uses is criminal in nature. And what happens with the current burundanga is that when you're exposed to it, you're just very prone to following suggestion. So it's kind of like a zombie drug. And then you don't remember anything that happened to you. So it's kind of like a very just perfect drug for, usually how it's used is, and I mentioned this in the book, when the character Chula's describing it, it's, someone might blow it in your face if you're in a taxi cab, and then they would just drive you to the ATM and tell you to withdraw your money, and you do, and then they just drive you from ATM to ATM until you can't withdraw money anymore. So I was just very interested in that tree, and I was very interested in the history of it. And when I was writing the book, there was a place in California that I lived that had the California version of that tree in the garden. So I think even as I was drafting the novel, I kept seeing it as I went in and out of my space. And so just kind of, through that process of seeing it constantly, it just kind of became more and more part of the book. And I think in the end, for me, the tree and the flowers started to live in parallel to what I think of as Colombia, which is this very beautiful place, very alluring, very seductive, very vibrant, like very alive, and then with this kind of like danger that's running through it. So once I got there and I understood kind of what the meaning was, and I just kept seeing it, it became a central part of the story.
Thank you very much. So your story is so beautifully written. Would you like to share a part of it or read something to it?
Sure.
Do you have a favorite part that you like to share? It's probably hard to think of the favorite part.
I'll read from the beginning. It feels so this is how the novel starts. The photograph. She sits in a plastic chair in front of a brick wall, slouching. She is meek with her hair parted down the middle. There are almost no lips to be seen, but by the way she bares her teeth, you can tell she is smiling. At first, the smile seems flat, but the more I study it, the more it seems careless and irresponsible. There is a bundle in her arms and a hole for the newborn's face, which comes out red and wrinkled like an old person's. I know it's a boy because of the blue ribbon woven into the blanket edge. Then I stare at the man behind Petrona. He is afroed and striking, weighing his cursed hand on her shoulder. I know what he's done, and it turns my stomach, but who am I to say whom Petrona should allow into a family portrait such as this? On the back, there's a date stamp of when the photo was printed. And because when I count back 9 months, it falls exactly on the month my family and I fled from Colombia and arrived in LA, I turned back the photograph to look intently at the baby, to register every wrinkle and bulge around the dark hole of his gaping mouth, to decide whether he is crying or laughing, because I know exactly where and how he was conceived. And that's how I lose track of time, thinking it was my fault that the girl Petrona was just 15 when her belly was filled with bones. And when Mama comes back from work, she does not yell, even though she sees the photograph, the envelope, the letter from Petrona, all addressed to me. Now Mama sits down next to me like taking off so much weight, and together we are quiet and sorry on our dirty stoop on Via Corona in East LA, staring at that fucking photograph. Should I go on? Is that good?
Well, you can go on. It's beautiful. I think we are enjoying it. I know I am.
I'll read a little more. Okay. We were refugees when we arrived to the US. You must be happy now that you're safe, people said. They told us to strive for assimilation. The quicker we transformed into one of the many, the better. But how could we choose? The US was the land that saved us. Colombia was the land that saw us emerge. There were mathematical principles to becoming an American. You had to know 100 historical facts. What was one reason for the Civil War? Who was the president during World War II? And you had to spend 5 uninterrupted years on North American soil. We memorized the facts, we stayed in place. But when I elevated my feet at night and my head found its pillow, I wondered, of what country was I during those hours when my feet were in the air? When we applied for citizenship, I rounded the hard edges of my accent, and that was one tangible way in which I had changed. We heard nothing for a year. We grew thin. We understood how little we were worth, how small our claim in the world. We had no money after our application fee and nowhere to go. Then we received the summons for our interview, the final background check, the examination, the approval. At the ceremony, they screamed a video filled with eagles and artillery, and all of us recited a pledge. We sang our new anthem, and once it was done, it was said we were American. The newest batch of Americans celebrated, but in the open courtyard, I let my head hang back. I watched this way of palm trees, knowing here was where I was supposed to think about the future and how bright it might be. But instead, all I could think of was Petrona, how I was 15, like she had been the last time I saw her. Absolutely
powerful, beautiful, beautiful. That the immigrant experience is a very difficult experience, and you write very beautifully and moving about it. Do you work with different groups? Do you feel to participate or meet or help other immigrants, or you can think about what's going on now to everybody that is an immigrant in this country? It's a
yeah, I used to work with undocumented immigrant population in San Francisco. And I did I got a grant from the city and was doing creative writing with them. And it was also kind of an art project. And they were also in the middle of learning language. So it was actually tricky because they couldn't write stories in English per se, or they would have to be very simple. So yeah, I was very involved with that, and I did that for many years. And I think it was interesting writing the book. The Chula became she got her citizenship before I did, and there was a kind of like a nice kind of poetic justice moment that happened when I sold the book. Is yeah, I think when I got maybe like the second payment for it, was when I could use that money for my own citizenship application. So that felt like I don't know, it just felt like a wonderful kind of, writing a book about immigrants and then using that money to myself kind of be able to say really. Yeah, so I think the immigrant experience has always been one of, there's something positive about feeling like an outsider or just feeling uprooted. There is a positive kind of side to it. And then there is, of course, like the cost of it and the weight of it. But I think that with the novel Fruit of the Drunken Tree, there's like so many kind of heavy things that happen in the book that I also wanted to make sure that it could be funny at some point, or even if it was kind of dark humor, it was just like humor at the strange moment or at the weird moment. That became something that I was trying to do. And I think that's something that I recognize too from the community, is just this desire to find joy or levity wherever you can.
Yes, that's very important in life, to find the joy and the life of that. So did you have a hard time finding an agent or a publisher when you wrote this book that took you 8 years during that time? Were you going to a school or a university that was helping you, or did you just...
What happened for me is that I published part of the story. I think that there's a chapter that is at the end of the book. I published that as a short story. And I had been looking for an agent maybe for a year before that, and had a few conversations that just kind of didn't go anywhere. So it was kind of very frustrating, but I got this excerpt published. And then after that, I think it was published on something like it was the end of the week. And then by Monday, I had a bunch of emails from agents asking if I had a book or if I wanted representation. So then it just became it was very easy. And I felt very, very lucky for that. And the place where I publish is Guernica, and they're an amazing online only literary magazine. And they do this wonderful intersection of the political and kind of the literary.
So that really helped you to publish this chapter. And then you had a whole group of agents that wanted you. And then did you have to write the book, or did you put all together all these different chapters that you've been working on?
I already had a draft by then. I think for me, it was always a little bit of an ambitious project, because I had the main family story, which has to do with Chula and her family. Well, really kind of Chula and Petrona, who are two young girls who are growing up in this very violent environment. So they're learning to be women. They're trying to be friends, and then they come from very different worlds, to the point where they can't really see each other and they can't really be there for each other. And then the pressures of the country kind of end up putting them in a dangerous, kind of threatening situation, and they end up kind of having to choose themselves or to turn the other person in. So yeah, so then that was there, and then I always had this ambition that I wanted it to also be historical fiction, and I wanted it to be an accurate timeline of the country. So it took many years for that reason. I think I read like all of the every single newspaper from like 1989 until 1994. So I just had a lot of information about this time frame, and I, did a lot of interviewed a lot of guerrilla members, former guerrilla members, um, talked to different people who had been kidnapped or families of kidnapped people. So it was I did a lot of kind of background research, and then the problem when you amass that much material is that then I had to figure out how it fit with the story, and fit it with the story in a way that it didn't kind of weigh it down, or that it didn't become gratuitous. And I think that was maybe a part that took a lot of thinking, and it took a lot of consideration and a lot of experimentation to see what would work and what didn't work.
So you did lots and lots of research, and you were able to talk to guerrillas and former guerrillas and so did you do that in the United States, or you were doing this when you weren't still in Bogota, and then you went to Venezuela, and then you immigrated to the United States. So were you corresponding on the internet, or how were you meeting these people, or did you go back to Venezuela or back?
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of, sometimes it would be I would start a contact online, and then whenever I went back to Colombia, I would just do an interview when I was there. Yeah, that's mainly how it happened.
So when you lived here in the United States, you would go back to Colombia. Was an easy thing to do, or?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm just not aware of how that all would transpire when you were here in the United States. So now you're a visiting writer at St. Mary's College. Can you tell us about that? Are you teaching a class to the students? Are you helping them write about their autobiography or their family, or choosing something?
Yeah, I finished teaching creative nonfiction, and I've taught just the art of the novel before. And I think I think that's what I'm gonna teach again next spring. So right now I'm teaching at University of San Francisco, and that's a fiction class. It is kind of great to be on the on the other side of it, like because I remember being a student, and I remember kind of showing up to class with stories. So it is fun, and it does have this really nice circular feeling for me to be teaching. And I do love teaching. I do love nurturing young writers and helping them with their stories, or telling them what I know about narrative structure and tension and how it all works. So I do enjoy that very much.
So you must have had a lot of English classes growing up in Bogota, and then you continued them in Venezuela. And then can you talk about your education?
I was just really good at English. I think I was just kind of just really good.
Just a natural.
Yeah, I was just really good at it.
Oh, and then when you came to the United States, what colleges, universities, schools did you go to?
I went to Columbia College in Chicago, and they were doing a very interesting. I first studied journalism, and then I later, when I started working as a translator, and then that's when I started to write fiction. The Columbia College in Chicago was having, they don't do it anymore, but they had at the time a writing program that's very different than anything that I've heard, where everyone kind of would come to class and you would sit in a semicircle and workshop, when everyone's kind of working on their stories, on their, fiction stories, you would tell them to each other out loud first. So you would come to class and you would just make up something and just tell the class, which was a lot. I've never heard anybody else doing this, it was very instructive for what works, because immediately if you start to tell a story and somebody is bored, that boredom is not something that anybody can hide. Like you can just tell if the story is not working. So I think it was just and my family tells a lot of oral stories. So I think I just felt very connected to that type of understanding of storytelling. So that's how I learned writing, was just by doing it. Kind of
Right.
a little bit kind of like tortured, just trying to tell stories to this classroom.
So you, in your book, you have a lot of supernatural elements, witches, ghosts, tarot cards. So that kind of came from all of your growing up in Bogota, and those are your family stories that you're able to put in your story, because there is that famous saying that you are a part and parcel of all of your pasts. And so all of your pasts are all of your families, and you've certainly been able to use that. And your natural ability with English is wonderful. It's a real gift that you have to be able to have done that.
So even when I was learning English in Colombia, I was just really good at the accent. So it's not that, I was just really good at hearing what the way that something is being said and then saying it in that way. So in the beginning of my learning English, I actually had a British accent because our teacher was British. And then we had American teachers who corrected that accent. But it's always felt a little bit sinister to me, this ability, because when I arrived to the United States, people would, and I'm telling you, like from the beginning, I sounded like this. Like I just was able to do the way that you speak it. Yeah. So it's always felt to me like wearing a mask. Like it just has this very kind of strange, there's a strangeness to it for me. But I think, writing and being interested in a language that isn't mine I think for me, it's kind of like emotionally parallel to not living in Colombia anymore, or just kind of being uprooted. And then I'm not even from Colombia, and I'm not really from here. And I'm in this kind of gray area. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really love writing in English, is because it gives voice to that experience as well that I have constantly.
Yeah, you feel like you're in limbo at different times, kind of between one and the other, that gray area that you talk about. Well, this is a fascinating conversation with you. Does anyone have any questions that you want to put into chat that you would like to ask Ingrid? Because Ingrid, one of the questions I always ask writers is, when did you want to be a writer? Well, I think you just almost were born a writer in a way,
I think I always loved stories, and I always gravitated towards stories. I think in the beginning, my mother is such a strong storyteller that I think in the beginning I was more interested in facilitating or gathering stories. So for me, journalism was kind of like I would be so good at listening, and I would be so good at interviewing people and like gathering facts. And then I think in practice, once I started to do journalism, it was just very not exciting. Or I would kind of like go and do the reporting, and I would return home, and then when it would be time to kind of like type up the story of what I had reported, I was more interested in my imagination. So like something that a story inspired by what I had reported. So I kept wanting to just write a fiction based on what I what I had gathered.
So
So it just kind of became very clear that I was just not wanting to be a journalist. And then I started to do translation. So I was doing interpreting. Yeah, and that's it. That's also like a very interesting language experience because I would be hearing Spanish and then I would be speaking in English. So it kind of felt like very much kind of like a medium of language, and you just kind of also in that it also felt like the limbo space. So yeah, so I think that was my journey into writing. Was after journalism, I finally embraced that I just really wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to write.
And so now that you're a writer, you're also teaching other writers. You're teaching English classes. So you're still teaching at St. Mary's, and you're also at what, University of San Francisco? Is that what you said?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you're there. So that's
Yeah.
a busy schedule.
I
And
do. Yeah, I have a little bit of a busy schedule.
very
Yeah,
busy.
but I do love it. I do love. I think that with young writers, there's so much possibility, and one of the things that I really enjoy about reading writing from people who are just starting out is that there seems to be like less fear and more desire for experimentation. And I think that's just because you don't have years of, trying something out and it not working. It's just like they just kind of arrive and try whatever. And I find that very kind of exciting. And it feels very nice to be able to witness it and to nurture it.
So do you think our culture has changed? That we're allowing people to just experiment and write. And previously, when you went to school, you followed a certain order of storytelling or the history or your research. So everybody's
Yeah,
or
I think that depends on the instructor. I think some instructors do kind of step into the classroom and they say like there was only one way to do a short story. And there's definitely, I definitely had teachers like that, and I found that a little bit suffocating. But I had other teachers who were just kind of like anything goes in fiction. And I responded much more to that approach. But I don't know if it's changed. I think we still have writers who are very kind of rule oriented, very kind of format oriented and kind of recipe oriented when it comes to literature and stories. But I think there's room for anything. I mean, I think that's part of it, is that with teaching writing, my approach is to just say like whatever you want to do. So whether you want to have an approach that is more structured, or whether you just want to experiment, or whether because we're all different and we all have different backgrounds. Yeah.
Well, that's good. You let everybody just explore their own talents and where they're going, and you open up a lot of doors for them. I can see that you'd be a very engaging professor, very engaging. So how long have you been teaching? A couple of years, or?
I mean, I just started, I teach, I have been teaching probably, I mean, I was working with immigrant communities since, I'm trying to think, 2012 or 14 or something. And I've started teaching at the graduate level since 2018.
So how did that pandemic affect you? Did you?
I
went to Zoom like we're doing today.
We all went to Zoom. I think we had a couple of classes in the beginning where we weren't sure about the virus and all that would happen. And then we went to Zoom. I do like, I mean, I think that there's things that we can do on Zoom that's not possible when we are in person. One of my favorite ideas that I came up with last year with my students was when class was over, I invited a tarot reader. And so we had a tarot reader in the breakout room, and then all of us were celebrating the end of the class, and then people could go and consult the tarot reader and then come back. And so it just kind of there's things that you can do on Zoom that feel very fun if you can be a little creative about it.
Well, I think we're ending the end of our chat, and it was absolutely beautiful, but I want to read to you what Sandra Cisneros wrote about this beautiful book and about Ingrid. She said, when women tell stories, they are finally at the center of the page. When women of color write history, we see the world as we have never seen it before. In Fruit of the Drunken Tree, Ingrid Rojas Contreras honors the lives of girls who witnessed war. Bravo. I was swept away by this story, and I think all of you will be absolutely swept away if you haven't had a chance to read it. And I hope you get yourself a copy of it and check it out at the library, or you'll probably want to have your own copy from Romans because you might want to read it over and over. It's an absolutely beautiful book. We will all look forward to your next story, to next, what was it, May or June of
July.
What?
July
2022. We will look forward to it, and we wish you lots of success. And I know you need to keep all of those notebooks that
Okay.
you and all those pages
I
where
will.
you scotch taped everything together. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today.
Thank you.
I have enjoyed meeting you very much, and I know so has everyone else today. Are there any chat questions anybody wants to put in the chat before we end? Okay, well, thank you very much, Ingrid.
Thank you.
And good luck to you. And thank you for everything that you teach everyone
You're
about
so
writing.
welcome. Right.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you for attending.